Welcome to the Full Dive Gaming Podcast, bringing you a full dive of all the news, discussion, and insights you need for virtual reality gaming. This podcast is brought to you by Asterion Products. If you don't know them, they're a top-selling company. They make AR, VR accessories, and they have something new coming shortly. I'm Jay Bratt, a VR YouTuber and occasionally a streamer too.
I'm Nat Bratt, a VR enthusiast who is slightly obsessed with Demeo.
And I'm Lipnox VR, a Quest YouTuber who finds all the gems on SideQuest.
You really do.
I go hunting for them.
If you're new here, our podcast is here to keep you up to date in the VR realm. We answer questions from all of you out there. We talk about some of the latest, greatest, or saddest VR news. And then we discuss what games we've been playing. And also, as a little special treat, I finally got to try the Quest Pro controllers for a while now on the Quest 2. So we'll have a short little Q&A section at the very end of the podcast for those of you interested in that. But we're here on YouTube with your audio platforms for you. And we got questions to answer. First one, Assassin32 asks, how are the layoffs at Meta going to affect VR hardware and software development? If you haven't heard about this, Meta announced they were going to have to lay off a ton of people. They've had a couple of rough years, and I don't remember the exact number, but I feel like 11,000 is the number in my head, which is a lot of people. But they did say very few of those were coming out of Reality Labs, and it was mostly out of their like human resources type division, which, I mean, if you've ever worked at a corporation, you're probably not too sad about hearing that an HR staff is getting slashed. So in essence, it shouldn't affect it. But what do you think? Have you read much about this?
I haven't read a lot about it, but I feel like HR can be important. Like, I know some people are like, ugh, HR, blah. But they're also the people that are there to help employees and support employees. So Twitter's like, getting rid of all of their employees, and now Meta has all these layoffs. Like, who's going to be next?
I think for me, it seems one of those things that the people they're getting rid of, I really don't think we're working on big top-notch games. Seems like it's all just people that were maybe doing things that aren't actually beneficial for the business model that they are trying to do right now. I know Facebook or Meta is huge on data collection. So I'm wondering if perhaps they kind of had a timeline of how they thought things would go. And since that timeline isn't a reality, they're kind of like, okay, well, we don't need these people anymore. Or perhaps the uses they had for those people just don't exist anymore. I think, Mark Zuckerberg has spent a lot of money to make VR what he wants it to be. And I think, perhaps he's got some people behind the scenes that are like, we got to cool down the spending a bit. And, I don't think this is going to change anything because I feel like regardless, the tech just keeps getting better anyways. Mm-hmm. And as much as, they're spending a lot of money to invest in that technology to improve it, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a big deal that these people aren't there. It sucks for those people to lose their job, though, but I don't think it's going to change anything games-wise or content-wise. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those people were working on things that just never even transpired to be anything.
Yeah, it's and with a lot of the headsets and stuff that are coming, it's kind of like the train has already left the station. They've shown that they have prototypes of all these headsets for coming years and that they're already working on them. So it doesn't look like this is going to affect much, although we will get into in the news some other news about Meta and people leaving that could affect it. But we'll save that for the news section.
We have another question here from Shafe Dog. I'm not going to read the whole background of the question.
I read over this. I was like, this is intense.
Yeah, check it out. Check out our Q&A section on Discord if you want to see the whole long paragraph of this question. But just getting down to the question itself, Shafe Dog asks, do you have a VR game that everyone has said was crap, but you find playing it fun and sort of a guilty pleasure? So I'm just going to go first because I asked the question. So my kind of guilty pleasure game that, yes, everyone thinks is dumb and terrible is Cat Lateral Damage. It's kind of silly. It's basically you're basically just being a cat. You can scratch like a scratching post. You can sit in a box. You can knock stuff off of counters. And I find it extremely fun and delightful. And I keep trying to get people to play it. And they're like, no.
I have a funny story about that game. I actually bought that game when it first came out for PlayStation 4, before VR was even a thing. So when I got PlayStation VR, that was like one of the first games I popped in the headset. And you know what? I don't like it as much as you like it, but it definitely is a fun time. I will say too, like the main gameplay loop is basically you're a cat and you have a time limit and you have to destroy as many things as possible. And the more things you combo into each other, the better points you get. So it is a fun gameplay loop. Motion sickness wise, for one of my first VR games, maybe not the best choice though.
I never even play it as like an actual game. I just do like the sandbox
Mhm.
thing where I
Okay, yeah,
just
that
go
makes
around
sense
and
too.
do stuff. I don't even care about the points. I just want to be a kitty.
Yeah, it was kind of a scratch the itch for Stray before Stray was a game, but of course
Mm.
in VR. A little bit of background for the listeners. Basically, Shafe had said there's another podcast out there, doesn't know who they are, but they say Res Infinite is great and he thinks it's crap. So he wanted to know what our guilty pleasures were. And I had a hard time thinking about these because I feel like most of the games that I like, it seems like at least were somewhat well received. But one game that I enjoy is Drive Club VR, back on the PlayStation VR with an actual steering wheel and
That's a good
pedals.
one.
And it's really fun, but it got kind of bad publicity at the time because people said it was too arcadey, it's not realistic enough. And I found with everything going on in VR, driving these super high-end cars super fast, I kind of liked that, it wasn't like super difficult to drive them, like popping in an actual Ferrari and trying to go 200 through a city. Probably would be, but that was just when you have that wheel in your hands, the immersion you get. And even though it was kind of fuzzy in VR, people didn't like that. You couldn't really see distances. The experience of driving like that in all these high-end cars, these convertibles, it was just a blast. So I did that quite a bit back in the day, and I need to get that steering wheel back out and try it with some proper games.
We gotta bust that out. We even have like the stick shift thing and the like pedals and stuff.
Fancy.
That was really fun.
Yeah.
Well, I will say like the blurriness in Drive Club was exactly the same when I played Gran Turismo, so I don't even think it was fair to like be too harsh on them. It just seemed like racing games in general for VR take a lot more power. But I don't know if this is completely widely hated because it seems to have gotten like so many more updates and just it seems to get decent sales. But I know when I was on PlayStation VR, I always got ridiculed for loving Drunken Bar Fight. And Drunken Bar Fight is so stupid. Drunken Bar Fight is so stupid, but when you put on the headset and that's one of your first games, just throwing random objects and punching people in hilarious ragdoll is just the ultimate guilty pleasure. And I think it fits the question perfectly to say that one.
That's a fun one. That's a good one for like parties.
Yeah.
You can like rotate out all the people. They can
Well, I think on PlayStation VR, you can actually even use the regular controllers and control the people in the bar to fight with the person that's in VR.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a fun party game, even if it's ridiculous. It was kind of like Blade and Sorcery before we had Blade and Sorcery. Obviously, it didn't have quite the same weapons, but had that same ragdoll. You smack someone with a bar stool and knock them off the roof. Just a fun
guilty pleasure. So Assassin32 has another question, and he says, how will Flatscreen to VR mods impact the VR industry? And he gives examples, Half-Life 2 now in VR, the old Doom games. We've seen all sorts of Dr. Beef kinds of things. So what do you guys think?
I think if we're talking like if we said specifically Dr. Beef, like it's great. It's good for the VR industry because Dr. Beef brings great mods in. Although if you're talking more like the early days of this, like Dolphin VR that would let you play pretty much any flat game in VR, like that was a way to make people sick. And the problem was other people who played a lot of VR thought, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So they'd have a friend come over and be like, what was your favorite childhood game? And then put them in Dolphin VR in that game VR and just make them sick as hell, make them feel terrible, and make them think VR is just awful. So I think that it's really good for the enthusiasts who want to take it a step further and see some of the old games or other things that they want to do. But I'm kind of glad that it's not an easy process for the most part, because I don't want these to be the first games new people play in VR, because a lot of times they're a little rough, they're a little hard on your body, and there's no quicker way to turn people off to VR than making them really sick early on and then having that hard to play again.
Yeah, I still need to go in VR chat and check out the Spyro world.
I think Jay even included a clip of it in the video. I watched the last episode. If you guys missed it, there's some footage of Spyro in VR chat.
I was not paying that much attention.
Missing out. But I will say with this question, one thing that I kind of think about is some official ports too. When we saw Skyrim come to VR, there was a lot of elements that were a little bit janky, and it was not a great title to show people first time in VR. Yeah. And I think, in a lot of ways that taking a game that works perfectly fine as a non-VR game, like let's say Resident Evil 4, when they did that port and they put all the time into it, it's amazing. But I don't like these, like you said, these quick things. I tried to get into Vorpex and I really did not enjoy Vorpex at all. And Vorpex is a tool to basically turn a significant amount of flat screen games into sort of VR-ish kind of thing. It sort of messes with the controls and messes with the graphics thing to sort of give it that VR thing, even though you can't use like two Oculus controllers, independent hands. But, some people have had great success with it. Me, not so much. But I think, going forward, if if Sony is smart, I think things like the Resident Evil Village thing or the Resident Evil 7, where the game is a VR game and not a VR game while at the same time and being developed that way, makes the most sense instead of trying to shoehorn VR into old games. That being said, I love the old games, so I will always want them in VR. But I think for the mainstream audiences, you got a game like High on Life that just came out. First person shooter. It's got the voice actor from Rick and Morty, and it's the team that did the Accounting Plus, and I think Trover Saves the Universe, or I think it was called Trover.
Squanch Games.
Those that kind of game, I'm just like, why is this only in non VR? Like, this would be perfect to have in the VR headset, and maybe it will be coming to that. But I definitely feel like that is more what I want to see, and less sort of mods. But
yeah, I agree there. It's definitely something that it's good that there's a modding scene, but we need the big developers with the money and the backing to continue to bring the good old games back in, because usually it turns out better. And I mean, for most of us, like Doom 3, when it came to VR, I loved it. Like, I would love to just get the old games. Not every game needs to be brand new, never thought of game for VR. Like, give us some of the old ones we already know and love also to keep us going while we wait for these new games.
True. Well, we have another question here from Jimmy593 asking, I've seen the haptic vest, but when will we see a haptic suit? Is what's out now worth the money? Jay, do you want to take this?
So basically, you've got a couple front runners in the industry right now for what's out there now. Haptics is probably the most well-known one, most well-supported in games, and it actually can even be supported on the Quest standalone now for certain games, which is pretty neat. Then you've got Wooger, who can be specifically made to do haptics, but if you try to use something like that on the Quest or even a sub pack, it'll just use audio cues. So it'll just hear a loud bassy sound and it'll fire sound into your body. I've tried almost all of them. The Wooger, I've tried their strap, but I've never tried their vest, which Shafe Dog, one of our listeners, said the vest is really good. But I will say, first of all of these things, you're talking a pretty penny for them. I mean, the cheapest one might be a sub pack or a Wooger vest, still costing you $300 or $400 or even $500. Haptics, you're talking like $500 to $700, and they do add another layer. Yeah, you get a couple Quest 2s. They do add another layer of immersion, and as like a tactical advantage, if you're a first-person shooter competitive player, and they work really well. If they work really well, this can give you an advantage, because say you feel a gunshot. Normally in game, it kind of shows you a hazy, like, oh, you got shot from the right, but it's not really quick. But let's say you felt you got shot in your like 5 o'clock position in your back, you would know turn exactly that way and return fire as fast as possible. So the ideas behind these vests, there is a lot of uses beyond just immersion. That said, for the price they are right now, I'm feeling like, wait. Personally, I've tried a lot. I've had a couple and they are cool, but it's another thing to charge. It's another thing to strap yourself into. Like, it's awesome if you're showing VR to tons of people, but if you're going to try and get this thing on every time you play VR, it's going to be a little much. And I think we're definitely a ways off from a full haptic suit, because even now with the vests, they have all these difficulties with having to have them charged, have them synced, have everything working. So a full suit would be just so much more work, so much more money, and probably not add that much more immersion. I mean, unless it was really fine-tuned, like if a zombie bit my forearm, I felt it exactly there. A haptic suit isn't going to change the game as much as just a really good vest would.
So I know I've done a whole bunch of research into this thing, and there's something called a Tesla suit, and it is your whole body, and it has like shocks on all the spots you get touched, exactly like Jay is explaining he wants. Last I checked, they were $5,000 American, and only special businesses that were like hugely in the industry could have access to them. It has, some sort of thing in it where you can do like full body VR, so it keeps track of your legs and your arms and everything. So it is the full package if you want that kind of experience. But again, I don't know what kind of compatibility it has for anything. I think it works in VR chat and probably Neos VR, but that's probably all you're going to get with that kind of thing. But that's where it goes with that. But again, like all these price tags, all these things, and like if I go back to like the VR chat thought, imagine you have leg trackers, foot trackers, arm trackers, wrist trackers, full haptic suit with the arm pad, the knee pads, all you got. Maybe you got an extra like helmet thing. You're going to be sitting there weighing like 1 billion pounds with all these batteries, keep all these things charged, and you're gonna be able to play for like 2 hours. So you need to stick yourself into an outlet again for an hour to be able to play again. So it's just, you're gonna be this hulking just weight of power consumption, probably not good for your health. So if you got the money to do it and you want to feel like a boss, I've seen some people posting pictures where they're all geared up with the stuff, and I'm like, that's super cool, but I just don't know. I feel like when you're spending like an hour putting on all this stuff, it's probably not something I'm gonna do very often.
There's a couple other factors. One, you better have good air conditioning.
Oh,
and two,
yeah.
you better not be someone who suffers from sudden onset pee syndrome, because you're not going to get out of that thing and make it to the bathroom in time. Who knows? Maybe they have
You can wear a
a
diaper.
pouch. Maybe they have a pouch that opens up like the old pajamas did in the back, so you can sit on the
butt
toilet. I
pouch.
don't know. But yeah, there's a lot more to think about beyond that. So yeah, I don't think we're quite there, but I think it's coming.
Picture a kid in a snowsuit.
Yep.
Yeah, like in Christmas Story, can't even get his arms down because it's so big.
That's what's gonna happen. The full immersion.
Well, Block has a friend, had a Quest 2 for almost a year. They played entry-level games, Job Simulator, Beat Saber, and even some with full motion like Contractors and RE4. They're past motion sickness. They're totally ready for anything we can throw at them, but now they're finding the headsets collecting dust. What games do we suggest to this person if they want more extensive experiences without any concern for motion sick, any of that? Like, what are basically the most intense games that they're going to get the most out of on Quest that are going to get them back in, get that thing off the shelf? What do you got?
Well, I think without any doubt, a good one to recommend for me is Iron Man, but I'm going to talk about that later on. So I'm going to go and decide to pick Bone Lab instead, because I think if you are, this more complex level of VR enthusiasm, maybe you're okay with going on and getting mods too. And I really like Bone Lab. I think it's really complicated with how the VR physics work. But if you've gone and you've played with all the things, you've done all the gimmicky things, if you consider the ragdoll ability that Drunken Bar Fight has compared to Bone Lab, it's a whole different world. There's literally like an aspect to the game where you can grab a crowbar and hang off like a line and zip line down. Like, if you want to mess with the physics and do all sorts of crazy cool things, you're at that stage of your VR lifespan. I think Bone Lab's just a really cool game. That's where I would go for. That's if you want something that's going to be that next level on the Quest 2 itself.
That's a good one. I have a hard time because I don't play a lot of different games. I get really obsessed with certain games and play those for a long time until I move on to the next one. So I think everyone's going to know what my recommendation will be, which is Demeo. Because that's,
Called it.
I mean, it's not really going into like all the, physics, mechanics and all that stuff, but it is just a really fun game that I think will like get you back into the headset. You do have to have at least a couple friends, or at least like one friend to play it with. I mean, you could do the skirmish mode, but I think it's more fun if you're playing with friends. So that might make it a little more difficult to get into, but you could practice in the skirmish mode. If you have friends, you can go in like the heroes hangout, which is really fun. Like painting the little figurines and stuff is actually really fun. And it's less annoying than painting figurines in real life because, if you mess up, you can just like erase it and stuff.
The paint's way cheaper that way too.
Yes, much cheaper to do a digital painting of ceramics than in real life. So yeah, there's a lot of different things to do in Demeo, and it's really fun, and I think it just kind of gets you back into it.
Yeah, even as someone who's played hundreds of hours of Demeo, even playing in single player, it's worth it to me. Like, it's really cool. I would say, obviously, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners 1 and 2 are picks that will give you a lot of hours, plus there's the sequel, which launched with some bugs. They've dropped an update, and supposedly that update fixed a lot. But I mean, if you start on 1, hopefully by the time you get to 2, all those bugs will be ironed out. But a quick mention, Into the Radius was probably the game most recently that I spent hours and hours. I think I spent about 30 hours, and there was a lot more I could have done. But I'm a person, once I finish a game, I usually move on because I got too many other games to play. But even then, you could take your time playing through it, make it longer. You could finish it and then go back and do all these other side missions and stuff. As long as you're into a survival game, post-apocalyptic, Into the Radius will give you tons of bang for your buck.
I knew you'd say that game. I was like, he's definitely going to say Into the Radius because you love that game. You put like 30 hours into that game. I was like, whoa, this guy's he's not giving up until he gets the credits.
Not only that, but I think the 30 hours was in like 1 month. Like it was
expensive.
Time span. Yeah.
So we got another question here from Chills94. And he says, I remember one of my buddies mentioned VR having military practicality, which begged the ethical question, should VR be used for torture? And I mean, like, I guess I saw the thing from Lucky Palmer, I guess the guy's name is, that used to work for Oculus, created the Oculus and everything, making a headset that could apparently kill you if you died in the game. And I've seen all sorts of weird video game things where they like plug in like shock things or things that like hurt you if you get hurt in the game.
Oh
I,
dear.
I guess those are things you could do, but I just for me, I mean, the only way you could torture me with VR would be to hold the headset in front of me and not let me play it. Like, I just don't see how you're going to be tortured by playing a VR game. But if there's always audio or visual things you can torture people with. But I honestly, I feel like if anyone's tortured, it's not being able to play that Quest Pro.
No sharing.
Nat, torture, ethical question, big bombs here.
Oh man. I vote for just not torturing people. How about that?
Yeah.
That would be
I like that plan the best.
Well, and in recent years, a lot of studies have found it's completely ineffective. Like, they think, torturing gets people to confess. People confess to something they've never done to stop the torture. So there's really no purpose. I think the military practicality is more in military training, which I think VR is very valuable for, especially if they get something like this. Hang on. Disclaimer, this is not real. This is a virtual reality gun stock right here that your Quest 2 fits into. One controller goes up here, and then one controller goes to a glove on your other hand. And if they were to use something like this is like modeled after a real M4. It even has like this here, the freaking mag drops out. I kind of don't remember how.
Just don't play near an open window.
Yeah. Don't take this outside. This is the battery for it.
Oh,
right
man.
here that goes in. I mean, if they have something like this, the training simulations could be very realistic. And I would say for that, it does have a lot of military practicality. But yeah, I'm sure anyone who has ever dealt with torture on any level knows that the people who are doing it already have 1,000-year-old ways they do it, and we don't need any new ways. So I'm going to go with no.
So if we have to torture, maybe it would be nice to have VR doing the torture, because then at least we won't have people having to do the torture, because it also harms the people that are torturing people. So
wow.
I guess that would kind of lessen the impact. But let's just not torture.
It's getting ethical.
Let's be done with that.
We're protecting the torturer now, not the torturee. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my. Well, I'm just gonna move us on. So Block had a quick question. What are your overall thoughts on the Quest Pro controllers? What problems have you encountered, and what features make them much better than the Quest 2 controllers? We're gonna have a whole dedicated block after the game section, so stick around for that. But we gotta tell you about some VR news. And of course, our sponsor, Asterion Products. I have something on the desk that I would really like to lift up and show to the camera, but I can't right now.
What?
But all I can tell you is that Asterion, if you've been interested in getting a beautiful VR headset stand, check them out on Amazon. Use code FULLDIVE10 for 10% off. Aura. So in the VR realm, we got some news. HTC has been teasing us for a while. Speaking of teasing, they have been saying cryptic tweets for months saying that something's coming, and go small or go home, instead of the traditional go big or go home. Well, now finally they've sent an official render actually of the front of this new headset over to The Verge, and they detailed a bunch of the features. So looking at this headset, it kind of looks like the HTC Vive Flow, if you remember that, the one with the gold lenses. But now instead, it's all sleek back. It's got cameras and sensors all over it. They say it's going to have 2 hours of battery life. It's not going to require a PC or phone. It's going to have track controllers. It's also going to have hand tracking. You're going to be able to connect it to a PC if you want to, or with a cable or Wi-Fi to play better games. It's going to have 4 black and white cameras, and then it's used one central RGB to recolor the whole scene into full mixed reality color pass-through like the Quest Pro has. But they've said it's going to be better than the Quest Pro. They said you're going to be able to look at a laptop screen, you're going to be able to look at your phone, and you're going to be able to read everything on it just fine looking through this. And of course, it's going to have a depth sensor, which the Quest Pro had one until the last minute. They scrapped that. But a depth sensor means now when you map out your room in a Quest Pro, you have to like trace your desk out and stuff. This thing will see it and maybe be able to just trace your furniture for you.
Sweet.
We don't know much beyond that. We don't know price, but they say it's going to weigh the least any headsets weighed on the market. but it's going to cost a lot more than like a Quest 2. So I'm guessing this is landing Quest Pro range. And we're going to get the rest of the details at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas next month, which I will actually be at. So I'm going to give you details first thing as soon as I find out. But Lip, HTC was like a biggest name in VR in the beginning. What do you think now? Can they make the comeback with this kind of a headset?
I super want a nice light headset that is just super easy to throw on, especially for doing like PC VR things. Because if the power is just coming from the computer, I don't think the headset needs to weigh that much to give me that level of power to be able to still do that. I don't know. Like when they're like, oh, there's going to be games that you don't require anything else. I'm like, so they're going to have their own game store, but how many games are even going to be on this game store? I see the Vive Flow, and it like came out, existed, and then was nothing. There was just no mention of it at all. And I think we spoke to a developer, and he said had like 10 sales or 100 sales total from all the Vive Flow things. So could be amazing. I think if you're spending Quest Pro numbers, you're probably just going to be PC VR anyway. I don't know. I'd love to get one, but I don't think I'm going to get one.
It'll probably be spendy, I'm sure. But I don't know. I guess I just get too excited about things. Maybe I just forget all the times we've been burned by things, but like this sounds really cool to me. And I really like HTC. I feel like they are kind of hit and miss with things, because I even remember like they had a really awesome phone back in the day, the HTC One M9 or something like that.
Yeah.
And that was a really good phone, but then they kind of fell off and didn't have anything cool after that. You know, with headsets too, it's like kind of hit or miss. So maybe this is going to be the hit, and maybe it'll be really cool. It sounds like some things are comparable to Quest Pro. I like having an actual competitor for Meta. So I guess it's kind of, we'll see what happens, but I'm definitely excited to hear more about it. And are they going to have it at CES, or are they just going to talk more about it?
It's going to be revealed, which I imagine means maybe on a stage somewhere they'll have one. Maybe they'll have a test booth. I really hope so. But here's my take basically on the whole thing. It sounds like it's going to one up the Quest Pro in every way, or at least that's their plan. The problem is the Quest Pro is not going to dominate the market. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
If they wanted to come in and dominate the market, they need to make a Quest 2 competitor that's lighter and better and has all these revolutionary features. But HTC as a company, they're not supported by something like Facebook or Meta. They're not supported like Sony. They can't sell these things at a super high loss, subsidize it, and then come back. So they've for a long time now, they've had to stick more to the premium end and that premium price because they can't afford to make a $600 headset. So I think this thing might be great. It might be great. Like the Quest Pro is pretty cool, but nobody's going to pay $1,500. You know, some people, yes, a small niche market, but the general masses, people who are thinking what they're going to get their kids for Christmas, aren't even going to have anything on their radar that's over $1,000. And I think at best, this thing could be $1,400, which is because that's kind of where their headsets keep landing. But even then, that's way too much for this to change the whole industry. But for those premium tier people, this might be a really great headset. I would love to try one, but would I buy one? Probably not.
Yeah, I think we're just a few years away from super light headsets, and I just feel like I don't want to drop the huge money now, and I can get something that's going to be way better in 2 years that's going to be probably consumer level price point. So
it's just nice to see other things going on than just Meta. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, you almost should buy one just to support competition again.
Right.
It's a lot of money, but if you want VR to keep having competition, maybe buy one. Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of Meta, John Carmack, VR pioneer and legend, is leaving Meta. He was the CTO and then consulting CTO. He's been in the VR industry for about 10 years, been, really backing VR and believing in VR. He started out with Oculus, then went to Facebook / then Meta. And he, in his years at Meta, has spoken out against some of these interesting things that Meta's done, talking about their inefficiency, being a little skeptical about changing their name to Meta. He sent out a departure letter where he compared Meta's operations to a graphics card that is always running at 5% of its capacity. So he's talking about Meta and how they have tons of people and resources, but that they're just self-sabotaging, they're squandering their efforts. Who knows, maybe they were listening to him a little bit when they were laying off a whole bunch of their employees that maybe weren't that necessary. But his letter really just seemed like he's just so weary of, fighting for all these years, trying to talk to Meta and change things and just not getting anywhere. And he just doesn't have the energy to keep fighting anymore. So this is a really sad thing to hear, especially since he's one of these people that have been, kind of in the pioneering years of VR. What do we think this means for the VR industry as a whole?
Lip?
I mean, he's sort of the pioneer of the whole thing. Like, I remember watching videos of, I think it was Doom BFG edition running in VR, PC VR, like way back, the original thing. And I remember even thinking, like, how do you move things? Thinking that, using a mouse and keyboard would be like impossible in VR. And now we're, where we're at now because of, in a large part, he was a big part of that whole advancement for these things to get where they were and to get headway. And Oculus probably never would have gotten the industry support they got if he wasn't on board with the projects. I think him leaving the company now is probably better for the VR industry than worse, because it seems like as much as Meta has spent all this money, there's a whole bunch of companies that are getting into this, and it's going to get competitive. And I'd rather be seeing John Carmack doing something where he feels like he's being appreciated and he's using his efforts to the best of his capabilities, because it sounds in a lot of ways that he's frustrated that they don't listen to him and that he's watching them fail because they didn't listen to him. And I think that he's a great, smart guy that knows what he's doing. Put him somewhere that he's going to get used properly.
Yeah, he's obviously our best wishes to John, because it's a huge blow to Meta, but to the whole VR industry, time will tell us. But one problem is he's left and said he's got his own startup that he's going to spend more time on, but that's Keen Technologies, which seems to be more of like an online training database that helps companies and corporate trainings and stuff. So he said in the letters he's leaving his decade with VR, insinuating maybe he's not going to do anything in VR. Although I would imagine at his level, he probably has some sort of non-competitive clause where if he left Meta, there's probably a year or something where he's not really allowed to do anything in VR. So I'm hoping we'll see him return. But he's been a legend even in just the gaming industry itself. He was the co-founder of id Software and worked on games like Doom and Quake, some of the most formative games. So yeah, he's left behind a great legacy and he's done a lot. But I do worry, as one of those like shining lights of truth at Meta that actually would speak out, like the more you lose that in a company, the worse the company will always get, because you need people that butt heads, that challenge each other and that push each other. You don't want it to be an echo chamber where Mark says, I want to do this. Everyone says, oh, that's great. That's brilliant. That's the best idea ever. And it just keeps saying that all the way down, because then it's just going to be one person's vision instead of people working together. I'm nervous about Meta because of this.
Oh, yeah. But again, this makes me excited for other things that are coming out there. Like maybe, I don't think Meta will completely go by the wayside, but maybe other competitors will come up more because they don't have their voice of reason there at Meta. And I read a couple other things that John has said over, kind of recently. And at a developer conference in October, he was talking about how Meta employees weren't even using their Quest 2s to like show people VR or demo them because of the bugs that were happening. There's all these updates and charging. And this is something that we saw when we were demoing VR to people at the Animazement conference. It was like, oh man, if you don't have those like Bobo VR battery packs, it's how are you going to keep all those charged when they don't last very long? And the updates, and even those, we had like 4 different headsets when we demoed them, or maybe we even had more. Like we had to like decommission one because it was like dying after a while, and some of them could only play like a couple games, and other ones it wouldn't work. So having someone bring up these things and be like, hey guys, this is not working, we need to do better, that's definitely going to hurt that company. So I hope that this means that we're going to have other competitors come up and give us something better. I guess I'm an optimist, so I hope that's what happens.
Yeah, well, ultimately, hopefully this is a wake-up check too, a reality check to Meta, reminding them, hey, you've got to keep hiring people that are innovative and want to do that, and don't think that you have all the talent in the door already, because you definitely don't. Yeah. So get more.
And people that are enthusiastic about the future too.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't just hire the guy that has the great business record. You want the guy that loves what this is and wants to see it
Yes.
turn into the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
So in other news, Resident Evil's Village release is stated for February 22nd, which is only a couple months away now, and will include the entirety of its main story in VR. And this is one that I did not play in Flatscreen because I was like, it's going to come, it's going to come, it's going to come. There was definitely periods of time that I was thinking that it wasn't going to come, but, happy to see it is coming. Unfortunately, I do not have a PlayStation 5 or a PlayStation VR 2 pre-order secured. So I don't know when I'm playing this one, but it looks unbelievable. It's got full use out of the PlayStation VR 2's graphics with 4K HDR display and just with like the eye tracking and everything. This is going to look insanity in the headset. Super excited for everyone that gets to try this out on the 22nd. What do you guys think?
I'm just so excited for PSVR 2. We've been waiting for so long. And it makes me so excited. It's like renews the excitement for VR because I feel like I've been a little bit in a rut with VR because, again, I've been just playing like, okay, I found a game, I'm latching onto it, I'm just going to play that. And with the PSVR 2 coming out, and having like all these cool new things, and we know like Sony does a great job with things that they come out with and a great job with like using what they have to the best of its ability. So even not thinking about the games, I'm just excited to try the headset. So I'm definitely can't wait to jump in for sure.
Yeah, we had news Resident Evil 8 Village was coming to PSVR 2. We didn't know when. And so now basically they're saying this is a launch day title. It's going to be there for you. And this is free DLC. This isn't a separate version you have to buy. You don't have to pay to get this. If you have Resident Evil Village, you've got this game if you have a PS5 and a PSVR 2. And the cool thing there is people right now are like, get on eBay. You can get this game for like $20 right now. You don't have to pay that much even like people did back at launch. And so for me, I am super excited. I held off on playing this. And everybody said Resident Evil 7 was one of the best PSVR games. I struggled a little bit with it. I thought that having to have the DualShock in my hands didn't quite feel like I wanted it to for VR. And there was times a lot of people got really sick from the game. There was times where like, I don't know if it was the frame rate got a little rough or what, but there was times where I was like, I don't even get sick in VR. And I was like, I don't feel amazing always playing this game for, that was probably 2 or 3 hours at a time. I probably should have kept it shorter. But I think that they held off with Village for this long because they knew they needed that extra power. They needed that better tracking with PSVR 2. And so they've held off and they've made something that from what people have said from early demos and from what the blogs are saying about, it looks like it's going to be really good. Great use of VR. So I can't wait. I got to jump on eBay or something and get a copy of this because I don't have one. I didn't buy it.
You haven't gotten that yet?
No.
We
just
think
pre-ordered the PSVR 2. It's like $600.
Marketplace, check your local pawn shops.
Yeah, look for the best deal on it. So yeah, I'm stoked. I can't wait. But I've been looking forward to PSVR 2 since the day I got the PSVR 1, I think. So I can't wait.
Yay.
We got games, of course. We've been playing games to talk about. We got to tell you one last time. If you need a VR mat to keep you in the space, keep you from punching your children in the face, check out AsterionProducts.com. They've got mats, headset stands. There's some other stuff going on with another company with them that's moving into the VR stars space that we'll give you more details as that's coming. But code FULLDIVE, one word, at AsterionProducts.com gets you $5 off any order, $19.99 or more. And after years of Iron Man being out on PSVR, which was the only place I played it, Lip, you've been playing it on Quest.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's one of my favorite, if not absolute favorite VR games for PlayStation VR, and having it on a wireless headset that legitimately, and I'm going to talk mostly Quest, but it feels like it's exactly the same game I played on PlayStation VR visually, which blows my mind. I had base PS4, I wasn't using Pro or anything, but then the load times that were a huge problem in that system, virtually non-existent. When you're Iron Man and you're like Tony Stark, you can actually use the analog stick to walk around like a proper VR game.
Thank
explore
goodness.
the mansion and goes like there's one spot closer to the start of the game. You're looking out at the view of just the sunset. And in the PSVR one, you're stuck to these like basically a cutscene. And this, I'm like, oh, I'll go talk to her later. I'm going to go look at the viewpoint. And I was just sitting there just being amazed with how good it looked. And I think for me with Iron Man, I loved the game already, but this was the quality of life thing where all the little quality of life things they fixed. They didn't really add new content to make it feel like someone was missing out beyond those sort of walking around as Tony Stark. But like another thing too, performance-wise, there's one of the challenges that's in this like old factory thing. And I remember on PlayStation VR, the frame rate would always dip in that level. And I tried that level in the Quest, no dips whatsoever, flawless.
Nice.
And then like also too with the controls, I know that Iron Man was designed for the PlayStation VR controller because it's just the way that the shooting and the jetpack things are all positioned. But it translates perfectly fine on the Oculus controllers. But now, because we're completely wireless, you can totally play this game. Like you get so much better at this game, not even having to worry about that right stick and just turning around. No cord wrapping around your legs. You just, if you need to make a quick turn, you just turn your body. You turn your neck, and you can do those time travels really, really fast. And you can literally feel like you are a man that has jetpacks in his hands flying around, and that is like the coolest thing ever. So I feel like this is just a must-play game. I love it so much. And Jay, you played the PlayStation VR version. What did you think of that?
Well, the PlayStation VR version was kind of revered at the time for one interesting reason. They built in some predictability algorithms, and the way they designed the game, you could play it turning 360 on PSVR and it would still play fine, which was amazing because everybody knows how to play PlayStation VR. You had to face the camera with all games. You had to not turn, and that allowed you the ability to turn freely. But the problem was you still had the cable to deal with. So ultimately, I was always worrying, am I twisting up my cable? Am I going to trip on something? Am I messing something up? So I always had that in the back of my mind. And then the thing that actually made the game the hardest, that like you've talked about here, is when you're in the mansion. I was like, why can't I freely move? I have these stupid points I can teleport to from point to point here. Like, I want to walk around and look at this stuff up close, and yet I'm stuck in these positions. So little things like that kind of hindered the game in my mind. Like, I still enjoyed the gameplay, but it was enough of a hindrance that I don't know. I played several hours of the game, but I didn't finish it, and I never ended up finishing it because those little things got in the way. But then once I heard it was coming out on Quest, I was like, this would be the way to play it, where you're wireless, you're turning, you're free, you can do whatever you want and not worry about it. And now that you've said the quality of life is better, it looks just as good, which is shocking because PlayStation 4 base even is more powerful than a Quest 2. That makes me want to get in and try this again because I'm like, okay, this sounds like the way this game should have been all along. And PlayStation VR did its best, but I think this sounds like the way I want to play it.
Plus, I mean, I don't know if anyone else has brought this up, but in a weird sense, you kind of look like Tony Stark does in this game. I don't know if you guys see it, but when I'm playing the game, I'm like, that kind of looks like Jay. And like, maybe it's especially when it's the red version of him, the gunsmith character, but I'm like, that kind of looks like Jay.
I'm going to put a side-by-side up on the screen now.
You gotta make a video now. You gotta make a gameplay video now. And you should just be Tony Stark for Halloween next year.
Oh, that's cool. There is something about that in the game. I remember there was some game, I can't remember what it was now, coming out, but people were super excited on Reddit because like it was a pretty common name, and people are like, that's actually my name. So when I'm in the game, it's gonna feel like they're actually talking to me. Little things like that make a difference. Yeah, even on PSVR, it was an interesting, fun action game. There was times where I felt like the action got a little repetitive and ran a little long. Did you feel that way still playing it on Quest, or was the freedom a game changer enough to just make you just go for it?
I just think because, you have so many different choices, you can choose to customize your things. You can basically have like a main attack, and then like your hands turned, like there's like this attack, and then there's like this attack. And you can use between those two things to like have all these different things. You can do the punching, do the ground slams. So I at no point felt like I didn't have just a ton of just different arsenal of tools to use. You get the unit beam that comes out of your chest. So I felt like, there could have been more diversity in enemies. And I will definitely say that is where question is, there. And the wave-like nature of it, where it's more like, here's your level. We're going to keep sending you enemies and story bits as that goes on. There's not really a lot. There's a couple parts that are sort of linear based, like moving forward. But most of the time, it's sort of sandbox nature with flying around. But again, like you're Tony Stark, you fly around as Iron Man, so it feels proper to what I want from that kind of thing. And it's got a great storyline. The one thing I am curious, because I at no point felt this way, because I think partially is because I played the demo so much. Did you find the flying difficult at all? Because I know a lot of people online complain about this game. It's too hard. I can't fly.
Whew, that's an interesting point, because I really didn't think it was very hard. It seemed intuitive because you have a rocket on each hand. You kind of just point the hand the way you want to. And I do wonder if some of those people, the PlayStation VR was always meant to be played sitting down. They always said that.
Yeah.
And a few games like Batman Arkham or Iron Man might have said in the beginning, hey, this would be better played standing, but that wasn't what they told you to do from Sony. So I wonder if some of those people were sitting, because that would be awful. You need to have full mobility in this game, because if you want to fly forward, you need to have your hands back behind you, blasting those rockets to your backside. And so sitting wouldn't be an option. So so I don't know. I wonder if that's where that came from.
It's to your backside.
So yeah, I never had an issue with it, but I pretty much always stand for VR games. And a game like this, you've got to be standing. You're not going to be able to sit unless, of course, you have some sort of reason you have to sit when you game. And if that's the case, I'd say sit in like a kitchen chair where you can put your arms around. You don't sit on the couch, because the couch is going to block you too much.
Yeah, admittedly, you can still turn with the right stick, so it is possible to play the game with while sitting, but it's not nearly as enjoyable.
Yeah, definitely.
And motion sickness wise, I didn't get any motion sickness, but I usually don't get motion sickness. I still would say that this is sort of expert, experience in VR kind of game, not your first thing to put on the headset and play. And overall, yeah, it's definitely a yay for me. It's one of my absolute favorite PSVR games, and I was in just jaw drop mode when I saw it was coming up to Quest. I was like, yes, I need to play this again. I have it on the headset that I want to use, completely wireless. I could go anywhere in the world and have Iron Man with me, just stash away my backpack to go put on. That makes me happy.
Yeah, and it's $30. That's a factor. That's not a premium game price. $40 is kind of on Quest, the premium game price. Like Walking Dead just came out at $40. So $30 too, you're getting a lot of game for $30. So I would definitely say, at least if you are at all a Marvel fan or an Iron Man fan, it's definitely a yay. If you hate Marvel, maybe wait for a sale. But if you don't and you like it at all, you're going to have some cool moments on Avengers Tower and stuff. Nat, Demeo has launched its final campaign, the 5th one, the final boss, just a few days ago. But of course, because it came out, we had to have some friends over that night and try to play this campaign first thing. What were your first thoughts as someone who's played quite a bit of Demeo, but not a ridiculous amount?
Yeah, not a ridiculous amount like you, but still quite a bit. I love the new campaign. It is so cool. I know that it's just always really cool when a new campaign comes out because it's new, but the new character, especially, I played the new character, the Barbarian, and he is a really cool new character. There were hardly any cards that are the same as other people. So he has his own like specialty cards with specialty moves that he has. He has this grappling hook that can be used to move really far or to attack, which is really cool. He has really high attacks, which I love. My favorite hero to play before the Barbarian came out was the Assassin, because the Assassin has some really high attacks too. But I think the Barbarian is now, I don't know, I feel like it's on the same level for me in the fun factor of just crushing enemies. I did get a little excited crushing enemies and then died or almost died a whole bunch of times. So I think the Barbarian would be better coupled with maybe having the Guardian nearby or something like that.
Healer kind of thing?
Yes. I should probably go a little more in detail because not everyone is obsessed with Demeo
I'm trying to piece it all together.
Well,
go ahead.
The thing about the Barbarian, it has this grappling hook, like you said, you can throw really far and it pulls you across the map, but that pulls you away from your group. Demeo is a team-based game where you need to have your group with you in case you need to heal each other, revive each other, or the Guardians, the tank, you pretty much have the Guardian out there to take the damage first. But with the Barbarian, you can run ahead of the group and then end up in a really bad situation because you have no one.
Classic Leroy Jenkins.
Yes.
Exactly the problem. So yeah, it looks really cool. I had to go in and play a little bit by myself with the Barbarian to figure out some of the mechanics, because there was some things it didn't really explain to you what they were. You have this empty card in your hand and you have no idea why.
That was driving me bonkers.
Yeah. And so what happens, you figure out later, there are these oil lamps or ice lamps, things around the map that you can attack that blow up and hurt a bunch of enemies around them. Well, because the Barbarian has a hook, he can hook that, pull it back and grab it, and it becomes a card now that he can then throw later. So that was that would have really helped us if we would have known what the heck that was the whole round, because that's huge to be able to throw a really powerful lamp to blow up on people. But the new campaign added all kinds of enemies. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who's wondering, but it's beautiful looking. It's free if you have Demeo, but if you don't have Demeo, you need to buy it because the price is going to increase next month from $30 to $40, which goes from that kind of line we talked about earlier of, a not premium game to a premium game.
Yes.
With how much they've added, I think it's fair.
Oh yeah. And they're going to be adding that versus.
Yeah, there's a
thing.
PvP mode coming where you can like build a stack of cards and your heroes, and then you go up against another player who's looks like they're controlling the monsters actually, or choosing what kind of monsters to put you up against. Yeah. It's quite the update, and it's not over yet, which is good news because we thought the final campaign that was going to be the end, and they're like, okay, not only that, it's coming to PSVR 2. It's coming to PS5 flat. Came out on Epic Games as a flat game. It's just going everywhere. So I'm hoping Demeo will become a household name even outside of VR as it keeps expanding like this.
It's so
I had no idea it came out flat too. That's crazy.
Yeah, of course it doesn't feel as good, but it's a well-made representation, and that gives you the option. If your friend only has a PC, you can still play Demeo with all of them. Like that's the big deal of that.
That's where I'm like, I don't know if I can find friends that'll play it in VR, but I could definitely find friends that'll play it on PC flat.
Right.
That's where it might be time. It might be time, Lipnox. You got it on. You can get it on your headset. And then you can get your girlfriend to play it on the PC with you. I don't know if you have if you have a PS4. I don't know if it's coming out on PS4, but if it does, then, young ones can play. This is time, your channel, like we talked about before, it's time to make it the Demeo channel. The family that plays Demeo.
Hey, the family that plays Demeo together stays together.
Yeah.
It's all the
It's
teamwork.
great for team building. Yeah. That family dynamic, that bonding.
Well,
Perfect.
Lipnox, you've said that you love your Quest 2. You play it a ton. You're not going to buy the Quest Pro. That's a ridiculous amount of money. And I agree. If I hadn't sent one, I wouldn't have bought it either. But now the Quest Pro controllers for a $300 upgrade, which sounds like a lot, but let's say your Quest 2 is old, your controllers are broken, they're going to cost you $150 to replace anyways. Now you can get the Quest Pro controllers and use them on your Quest 2 to kind of upgrade. I got to do it a bunch and test it out. So for you, Lip, someone who kind of might be in that situation, what would you want to know before you would consider spending that kind of money?
So I already have been thinking about it. I'm like, okay, what could this, even from the start, that's one of the things I wanted to know about. I would say the part that I'm most curious about is what actual improved functionality do these offer? Do you actually notice the difference in the tracking? And are there things that don't work with some games?
So first and foremost, I'll talk about the tracking because before they were available on the Quest 2, I was playing them on the Quest Pro. And I thought, wow, the tracking is so much better. It's so much more responsive. There's no such thing as a dead spot. And then when I paired it to the Quest 2, I realized that a little bit of the problem with the Quest 2's controller tracking is your processor is already doing so much. It's running the games, it's tracking the controllers. If you're recording, that's a whole nother beast. And so the Quest Pro controllers don't feel quite as amazing on the Quest 2. They still track better. You can still put a controller behind you. It's not going to have a problem. You can have it on a golf club and swing it. It's never going to lose tracking. But like in Beat Saber, where I felt like I was playing on an index again when I was on the Quest Pro, when I went to the Quest 2 and I played Beat Saber, I didn't see the controller bounce around at all on me, but it didn't have that like instantaneous movement that it had on the Quest Pro. There was still this like tiny bit of lag when you would swing that you notice on the Quest 2 if you play it a lot, and it just didn't quite give you that feeling like when you're playing on a PC and how it super keeps up. So the tracking, it is better as far as dead zones, but the actual instantaneous responsiveness that you need in a fast game like Beat Saber, I felt like still wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. But there's very few games outside of Beat Saber that you're ever going to have that problem. You're not usually swinging that fast in like a shooter or something. But like for shooters, there's no tracking rings anymore, which means that when you go to reload and stuff, or you reach up near your face, you're never hitting yourself or controllers anymore, which is very common, at least at first when people get a Quest 2, you kind of learn over time to not do it. But all of a sudden,
I still do it.
About it. Yeah, I do it too. I smack myself in the face and I'm like, oh, luckily the headset's there to take the hit. But when you've got like a 3-inch headset sticking out from your face and a 3-inch tracking ring sticking out from your controller, that's 6 inches of distance you got to keep around. Yeah,
I have like extra like padding on my controllers just to make sure that doesn't happen and break them because I bang them together so often trying to reload things.
Yeah. And with the Quest Pro, you're almost never going to do that. You'd hit your fists together first. It's very hard to hit the controllers together because of their smaller profile and the way they work. The fact that they track the room around you instead of having to be tracked by the headset does seem very nice because you don't have to worry about can it see it. But people ask, oh, does that mean the Quest 2 is going to run better because it's not having to have that resource of noticing where they're at? I couldn't tell a difference. If it is, it's negligible. The Quest 2 still had drop frames in certain games, stuff like that. But one thing that people have pointed out that they really like is the games that do utilize it, which isn't all of them, there is 2 haptic motors in the Quest Pro controllers, one at the front and one at the back. So where the old ones, you hit something and just the whole controller would kind of vibrate. Now it can kind of simulate a hit, because like the top one will vibrate just a millisecond, before the bottom one, but that makes it feel like the top of a sword hit something and then you feel it hitting your hand instead. So there is that to be thought about with the haptics. And with price, these are, like I said, they're a lot of money, but if you were at a point where you had to replace your Quest 2 controllers anyways, it's not that huge of a leap like it seemed in the first place. But I think that's pretty much answered the question there, tracking all that stuff. So like, what else is something that you stood out? Nat, you haven't gotten to play them as much. Is there a question that you have still since I've been hogging it?
Oh, I played it one time on the Pro.
The question is when. The question is when.
But I remember in your video about using the I almost said Pressed Quo, the Quest Pro controllers with the Quest 2, that they can take a while. Like they don't instantaneously start when you put the headset on. It takes like a little bit for it to connect.
Yeah. So if you played a Quest 2 a lot, you pop your headset on, you grab your controller, and the instant that controller moves into your hand, it snaps into place. You see it there. The problem with the Quest Pro, they have their own computers inside of them. They're doing their own tracking through the cameras. So when you pick them up, they have to wake up, look around the room, reset their tracking points, and then they snap into place. And sometimes that's about 3 seconds, and sometimes it goes all up to like 10 seconds. And that is a long time when you're sitting there waiting for your hand to show up in VR. Like you put it on, and that's the one thing that I kept saying. At $300, if you just spent $300 and this is your first impression now, every time you pick this thing up, you're waiting 10 seconds to get your game started.
That was 10 seconds.
Yeah, that's a long time.
If you're watching, because I guess I didn't say anything, but I like
put your hands up and waited.
Time.
It is a long time. And that would probably be the biggest problem people from the start would have. Of course, I like the fact that they charge through a dock and that they're always charged and ready. But let's say you forgot to put them on the charger last time and you're about to jump into a game with friends. You're done. You can't swap batteries. You can't even really hook a charger into it, because it's not like a USB-C in the bottom that you could deal with having. It's like a magnetic snap-on charger. It's not a super strong charger. You literally would have to wait for these things to charge. Now you'd be effed. And of course, if you still had your Quest 2 controllers and they still kind of worked, you could go through the process of repairing those. But that's not an easy process, and you can't keep them paired. I was hoping you could keep them paired and just grab whichever set you wanted to. Not an option. Yeah.
Definitely
so there's
some downsides.
There is downsides, and they are kind of deal breakery in my mind at $300. They are something that I'm hoping maybe will be updated though, because when these first came out, you couldn't even pair them to the Quest 2. Maybe they'll hear that, oh, well, we want them to pair along with our Quest controls. Maybe they'll let us do that eventually. But right now, it's a bit of a hard sell.
So I'm curious, I just thought about this. You do all these accessory reviews. Are there any kinds of accessories for those controllers yet? Because like I feel like I can't play a VR controller that doesn't have some sort of knuckle grip these days. I feel like I'm going to throw those controllers and they're going to go across the room and smash or something.
Well, there's a couple layers to that answer. First, I will say in comparison to the Quest 2 controllers, the Quest Pro controllers are much more grippy. They have more weight in your hand. They feel a lot more premium. So they really feel like they're not going to slip out of your hands as easily. 2, there are some accessories specifically for the Quest Pro, but so far no one has been able to get it right to where you can have an index style strap and set it on the charging dock. Pretty much every grip you have to unroll it or take it off to charge them, which is going to be pretty annoying when you're charging these every single time you use them. But 3, the other interesting thing is some of the Quest 2 accessories still work with them. Not any grips, but like gun stocks that they like slid down into, or like a golf club that slid over the bottom and then tightened onto it. Anything that attached just solely to the bottom, the shape is still similar enough that those accessories are working. But if they relied on the tracking ring, or if they relied on snapping over the top of the controller where those cameras now are, those aren't going to work for you.
Good to know.
Yeah. Well,
so I don't know if you know this, but have you seen anything with if you turn the Guardian off, will these controllers still work, or do they need to have that room drawn out for them to work properly?
They do all their own tracking, so whether if the Guardian's there or not, they seem to track just fine.
Okay.
You don't have
That's
to
good.
map out furniture for them to work. They just find it, just like your Quest does. When you walk into a new room, it finds the room on its own. It doesn't care if it just wants your Guardian there before you're allowed to use it for safety. So they do all that. And there was some issues early on with the controllers. I found I was able to like get them to drift away from my hand and stay there. But with this last update, I've tried several times to get that to happen again, and I haven't been able to. Although someone commented they're still having it happen. I didn't confirm that they have V47 installed and all of that, but I haven't been able to replicate that issue since the update.
Admittedly, I had that issue with my Quest 2 controllers the other day when I was playing. It only happened once or twice, though. But I was like, no, hand, come back.
It kind of takes you back to the PSVR days because that was terribly common on the PSVR. Well, if there's more questions out there and you're wondering more about the Quest Pro controllers, come join the Discord and ask whatever you want. We'll answer them on a podcast in the future. I think we've actually caught up on our questions because there's usually quite a lot. I think we're actually caught up. So ask a question now and it'll get answered on the next podcast. And of course, you can tell us what games you like and influence the future of the podcast, influence what we play, what we talk about on it. And if you're here listening, we love you. We want to say thank you for being here with us. But you can also come see our faces on YouTube. We have a fun time here, and you can see Nat counting down 10 seconds on the screen without saying anything. You'll know what's happening. But you can always take us on the go, of course, too. And that's where you can rate or review. That makes a huge difference for us. But
I also wanted to say, if you're watching this episode, you can see my What the Bat shirt that I stole from Jay. So
yeah, What the Bat, a game I still haven't played, but they sent us a very weird box of accessories about the game. Had to cut out a little paper elephant myself and assemble it myself. It was quite a bit of work.
Oh, I should have brought that over. I have that too because I made you give it to me.
See, I keep the headsets and she steals the accessories apparently.
just got all the shirts.
But that's because VR is so great. And so if you're thinking about VR, what's the time to do?
Dive on in.
Hey, thanks everybody.